Hello, Walking Dead fans. This is Jesse Jackson once again, stepping in as a special guest host on the Biters podcast. I was at Dragon Con this Labor Day, and there was a panel, Influence of the Walking Dead. I taped everything except the first few minutes. I was moderating the panel, and so I was so busy getting everything ready, I forgot to hit record. So you'll miss the very beginning of the podcast, but the rest of the discussion is there. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you for listening.
What a dummy. But yeah, so I've been reading since issue 1, and I've been absolutely thrilled with it, even partly because I remember when it was called Dead World. I mean, I've been around for a little while. God, I'm so old. You can tell that. I have a beard like this.
So, Widget, were
Yes.
you, as a fan of the comic, were you excited about adaptation, or were you skeptical?
I'm skeptical about every adaptation.
Okay.
We live in a post-Phantom Menace world where we need to be braced for disappointment at all times. But I will tell you that I've been more or less pleased with a lot of what I've seen on the series, and I actually did a set visit where I did a psychic projection back to my 1984 self and said, "You're never going to believe where I am now. It's the #1 show on television, and it's about zombies." And my younger self went, "I knew I was going to be on drugs."
Yes. Morgan, how about you?
Okay, so my history with zombies is not actually quite that long. I think the first zombie movie that I ever watched voluntarily was 28 Days Later. It scared the bejesus out of me, and so then when I saw the trailer for The Walking Dead and I saw Rick Grimes riding that horse down Peachtree Street, I was like, no, this is not going to happen. And then I had my third baby, and I had escalating postpartum anxiety with each of my children, and shortly after I had my third baby, we had a rabid raccoon in my driveway. And somehow my postpartum anxiety got really fixated on that rabid raccoon. And well, rabies is a lot like zombies. What if there's zombies? What if zombies come and they get me? And it morphed into some full-fledged postpartum psychotic episodes where I became super obsessed that zombies were going to be in my yard. Because this is sometimes what happens when you have postpartum depression or anxiety, as it gets worse with each baby. And so then I'm like, okay, well, the only way I can really handle this is to become super prepared for the inevitable time that zombies are going to be in my yard that one time that I look out. So I started consuming as much zombie media as possible, and I started with The Walking Dead. And it was towards the beginning of the second season, and I consumed it all, and I'm like, okay, what's next? And so then I started going out and looking for other media, and as it's come along, I've really tried to find a lot of different stuff. I love And the Flesh. I love Izombie. I love the completely different take on it. And so that was kind of, I kind of came at it from a really weird angle as a coping mechanism for my temporary crazy, which got better, and then the zombie part didn't. So I'm still just as obsessed in an unhealthy way with zombies as ever, but everything else is totally better now.
Good. Very
I
nice.
just want to say, real quick, I'm so sorry. If I'd known about the raccoon, I never would have gotten you Guardians of the Galaxy for Christmas. I didn't mean anything by it.
I actually love raccoons. That's
Oh,
why
okay.
it was
All right,
so
good.
upsetting.
Yes.
Rabbit raccoons.
He attacked my
Rascal,
mother's car.
right?
It was terrifying.
Did you read Rascal as a kid?
I did. I read everything.
Yeah,
Raccoon.
I loved Rascal. All right, John?
Thank you for asking a really great question. Because
I will pay him $5 later.
We all come at it from different perspectives, and since I probably have 20 years on each one of you here being so old, I came at it from a novel that really was not about zombies. It was about vampires. I was born in 1954, and in 1954, Richard Matheson wrote I Am Legend.
Yeah.
You probably
Oh,
saw the
yes.
film with Charlton Heston or some of the other actors that did that. But Richard Matheson's novel I read growing up as a kid, consuming a lot of sci-fi, a lot of horror things. And when I read a very short thing in Famous Monsters of Filmland, which was the magazine that I sort of grew up on, Forey Ackerman's magazine. I read that George Romero was making a film version of I Am Legend. I thought, oh, this is going to be so cool. But of course, the film version had nothing to do with vampires. It had to do with zombies. And that was Night of the Living Dead. And George Romero said that he was so influenced by I Am Legend that he really tried to get the rights for it. The rights had been sold off, and so he couldn't get the rights, but in spirit, Night of the Living Dead really captures that whole sense of fear, anxiety, the end of the world that is happening that you see in the book. And so Night of the Living Dead, he made on a shoestring budget, as most of you already know, and that, of course, morphed then into Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and the other Dead films that were there. And I consumed those like they were candy as well. Dawn of the Dead, I would say, that's the one set in the mall. And it's supposed to be, a metaphor for our culture, our consumer culture. I think that sets up The Walking Dead keenly for us, because we have a complete group of strangers. They don't really know each other, but they come together as sort of a family, and they are the ones fighting off the zombies who are attacking them all, and that's an incredible lead-in then to the comic books. And I met Robert Kirkman many years ago at the San Diego Comic-Con. I've been going for many years myself to the Comic-Con, and he was really no one at that point. He had done this comic book, and again, it was called something different than that. Didn't you just say it earlier?
Dead World.
Dead World.
Well, that was a completely different comic. But
Okay, yeah.
And so, that led into the series that he has. And even to this year, Kirkman was there talking about The Walking Dead and, the plans that he has for the comic book, as well as what he knows about the series. So, terribly fascinated with The Walking Dead. I watched the very first episode and was hooked ever since. And, of course, bought them all on DVD like everybody else does, and continue to follow them. What's interesting to me is I would never have imagined zombies in the Game of Thrones world.
Yeah.
But it works. And so, I have these 2 zombie shows that I follow now, among others. So anyway, that's my start with it.
So I am not a fan of horror. I do not like being afraid. I read, mostly, I love superhero comics, and I love Hallmark Channel movies, and I am just totally, I grew up, I am just a few years younger than you. I was born in 1959.
Right.
And so, I grew up watching Walt Disney movies, and I want a happy ending and everything. And, I had bought into AMC's, the quality of them doing. And I was listening to Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV, one of my favorite podcasts, and they were all excited about The Walking Dead. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to try it. And I certainly, I was a fan of Stephen King. That's the only exception I had in horror, is because I loved all his pop culture references and everything. And so as I watched the first series, I went, this is really good. It isn't what I normally want, and it isn't my genre, but sometimes something is so creative and so well executed that you find yourself being drawn into it, despite that's not my thing. And so that's how I got into it, and so that's why I was curious. I've not read the comics. I really have no interest to go read the comics, but I am, I'm engaged and really have enjoyed the ride.
Could you imagine, Jesse, for a moment, if Disney was going to do a zombie movie?
Yeah.
Okay, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs versus the zombies, or something like that.
So,
that would be so cool.
But that first episode, though, it draws you in. I was like, I have never seen something like this before, and I'm going to pee myself. I'm so scared. But, the moment that little girl turns around, and I'm like, what did I just sign up for?
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, I think it helped, I loved the actor, Rick's role in Love Actually.
Love Actually.
And so you're captivated by him. I think it's beautiful how excuse me, he wakes up and doesn't know what's going on, and neither do us, so it's a perfect answer.
Mm-hmm.
So
So,
don't get choked up about it. It's okay.
yeah, I know.
Jesse, maybe to give you a second to breathe, I'm curious. When you say it wasn't your genre, but you were drawn in anyway, was it perhaps the characters and the quality of their portrayal, their stories that drew you in, that hooked you?
Absolutely. There's people who watch The Sopranos because they want to see people get whacked. And there's other people that watch because they're fascinated by Tony's, how do you be a good father, a so-so husband, and then a business leader, and with all these different things. And so the characters definitely is what got me into The Walking Dead and kept me, and who I liked, and the characters change and they grow. So my next question is, in what ways do you think, game changer is a catchphrase, but what do you think, and we'll start with you, John, and we'll work our way down.
Sure.
How has Walking Dead been a game changer, not only in popular culture, but TV landscape?
Well, I doubt seriously if 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, we would have seen one show, no less than 2 shows, with zombies. So that's number one. And I will tell you, recently in reading a review that George Romero made of World War Z and The Walking Dead, he said he cannot produce, before he passed away, he cannot produce a zombie movie anymore because of the Walking Dead and World War Z. They've stolen sort of all of the air out of the room because of that. I came into The Walking Dead because I do love horror films, and, this is an extension of Dawn of the Dead, I felt. But I stay around because I love the characters, and I'm crushed just like everybody else when they decide that they're going to kill off Glenn or some other kind of character there. I was definitely on board with Rick. He was one of those characters in Love, actually. Great film. I hope you see it. It's a Christmas movie. I run across people who don't even know the film, and it's really too bad. Alan Rickman is in it among lots of other people. But he was very memorable in that. He's in love with his best friend's wife, and so they somehow come together. And I couldn't imagine him being cast in this series, but he is totally believable, even with the the Southwest accent of the character that he plays. I was more interested in Michael Rooker's character. Michael's here this weekend. He is such a fantastic actor, and seeing the quality of his performance and then just add on all of the others. And one thing I wanted to mention about Rick, going back to him for a moment, in all of the Westerns, it's usually that stranger that rides into town and is going to settle things and then is going to ride out of town. Well, they turned that whole metaphor, if you will, completely on its ear.
We've got ride out. Your horse is
right.
Exactly. So he rides into town. He's got all of these weapons. This horse gets eaten. He gets trapped in a tank. And who's the person who rescues him but the pizza delivery kid? I think that is so amazing, and it really completely undid all of the stereotypes that normally you see in those kinds of films. So honestly, that's what got me into it, and that's what keeps me watching week after week. Kirkman just said out at San Diego that Rick is not going to make it to the end of the show.
Wow. So there we go.
It was a huge.
Was it the end of the show or the end of the comic?
No, the end of the show.
Okay.
Wow.
And that was a huge thing to me because I'm really rooting for Rick. Now I'm thinking, who's going to make it? And everybody can be.
Mm-hmm. Spoilers. Anyway.
Well,
Morgan?
I'm rooting for Carl and Judith because I feel like it's the children of the apocalypse that interest me the most. It's the ones for whom this was normal, and this is the only life they really remember, and what kind of world are they going to make. So I feel like if every single adult character in the show ends up dead, as long as the kids make it, then the human race lives on. We build a new culture. But I think the biggest impact that The Walking Dead has had on the genre is everything that comes after has to decide, are we going to be zombies like in The Walking Dead, or are we going to do zombies that are completely different? And I think that a lot of the media that has come after has been, we're going to take this a completely different direction. And I think about the British show and The Flesh, and the way that they chose to treat zombieism in that movie, and the way that they sort of humanize the experience. And I actually have this entire theory that I have been working on about a generational difference in the way you look at how you're going to tell your zombie story. And I think a lot of the zombie stories being told now either by slightly younger writers or geared towards geared towards the millennials, are not stories that are about, the valiant humans fighting against the shambling zombies, or, I think it's a lot more about telling zombie stories where you are addressing the human element that is still left inside the zombies. And it could be in a comedic way like Izombie, where she's having to constantly keep herself from backsliding into that sort of zombie state, and in The Flesh, where they have to be medicated in order to keep themselves from backsliding and becoming rabbits, as they call them in the show again. The Girl with All of the Gifts is another one that's very, very good, where we have children themselves of zombies, and there's nothing to be done for the adults, but these children who are functionally half zombie can be contained, and they still think and they feel like humans, but they also have a compulsion to eat human flesh, which obviously creates a bit of a problem. And so I think we've really seen a split between, we're going to try and tell a story like The Walking Dead, but our protagonists are going to be what's different, or we're going to tell a story about zombies that is a completely different type of zombie story, and our zombies are not shambling flesh eaters. Our zombies are people who are trying to find themselves within the hunger and the disease and the lack of control. And I feel that speaks so strongly to, I think, younger people who are dealing with mental illness, or who are dealing with a lack of social acceptance due to gender or sexual orientation, or to people who just simply feel disconnected from other people. And I think that's where I really see the big split. I feel like a lot of the earlier zombie films were focused on the idea of, are we going to catch the disease? Are we already infected?
Yeah.
How do we get infected? How do we not get infected? And I feel like so much of that mentality is influenced by the AIDS crisis of the 80s.
Yeah.
But I think that when you are talking about a younger audience who weren't, I was alive in the 80s. I remember the AIDS crisis. But for younger people, even younger queer people, AIDS is now something that they've always known was out there, and so, am I going to catch the virus? The looming virus, we don't know how it's spread. Well, they know how it's spread, and they know how to prevent it. So that's not the dominant narrative that they need from their zombie story anymore. It's, am I a monster? How do I repress the monstrosity within me? How do I connect with other people, even though I know I have something monstrous in me? And Isaac Marien's series, Warm Bodies, the movie was cute, but it's definitely not the book. The entire thing is, the only thing that can pull you back from being a monster is a connection with other human beings, and an active, cultivated connection with other human beings. So to me, that's the big change, is that The Walking Dead is really kind of the last holdout of we are afraid of the disease and we need to fight against the disease, and that now we're seeing a new type of zombie genre.
And I know you want to make a comment, John, then I want to get to Widget. But I think also, if I'm a storyteller, I'm going, I don't want to retell their story because they're doing The Walking Dead. They're doing it well. And so the only way to be creative is to find a different angle. John, what do you want to say? And then I want to hear your Widget.
As I was listening to my colleague here, it strikes me that I've already mentioned I Am Legend. Please go out and get that. Read a 1954 novel. The zombies are really the heroes. It's not zombies, vampires, but they're really the heroes in the book. The person that scares them is Neville, who's hunting them down. He's the legend that they're talking about in the title. And once they eliminate him, there's not a threat to the vampires that are in the book. But essentially, that's your point that you're making, and that's that's been done. That's been set up.
Widget?
Sure.
To restate the influence.
Going down the line, first I want to say, I agree that the children are the end game for The Walking Dead. I personally think it's Carl and Sophia. Sophia's still alive in the comic, no spoilers. But yeah, I wasn't surprised when he said Rick wasn't going to make it, because that made total sense to me. The other thing, what's that?
It's passing the baton.
It's passing the baton. And
Right.
he's already said it's going to be like 300 issues, so that's a long time for Rick to get bits chopped off of him. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to speak to was you had mentioned The Sopranos and the game-changing nature of the series for television. And I think there's a really great book called Everything Bad is Good for You, which makes the case for, everybody talks about, oh, television's so bad for you, it rots your brain. It makes the alternate case, is that you wouldn't have, if you think back 10, 20 years, not only would you not have anything like Walking Dead on television, but like, something as complicated as Lost, where you have 65 characters and 25 plot lines and
Right.
stuff like that, or Game of Thrones, where
Game
you
of
have
Thrones,
multiple locations, and I can't see, it's amazing to me. Imagine pitching that to any studio or production company 20 years ago, and they say, no, you're going to make people's heads explode. They won't be able to keep
Yeah.
all that in their heads. So it's like, his case is, television has been training us to handle more and more complex stories, which I thought was fascinating. So I recommend that book as well. And the reason I asked you about the characters, and this is what I think Walking Dead has done more than anything else, is for years people would ask me, why do you like zombie stuff? And I would say, it's not about the zombies.
Right.
It's about the people.
Yes.
The zombies are just, they're there because they can mean anything. They can mean the AIDS crisis. They can mean creeping consumerism. You can put anything on them that you want. It's that thing that you can't get away from. You can't ride the horse away from them because they are slow, but they will catch up to you. So
Hitchcock called it the MacGuffin.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It is a walking, shambling MacGuffin that doesn't need to sleep and will eventually catch you,
Right.
kind of like death. But everyone that I've talked to, and that's why I asked you about, was it the characters? So, oh yeah, I love the characters, it's amazing. And I'm going, that's what I've been saying for decades. And
Yeah.
finally Walking Dead is the thing that convinces them. My mother, who was in her 70s, was caught up on The Walking Dead. When she said, my mom said she was going to start watching Walking Dead, I texted my siblings and I said, I'm so sorry, because I don't live there anymore, they do. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I tried to talk her out of it. I don't know what's going to happen. Just be prepared. She would go to the library and like binge watch seasons of DVDs. And I'm like, oh my God, we have turned the corner now.
My sister-in-law is my wife's sister. So my wife, not a fan of anything genre, barely will go to see a superhero movie with me. It's just, we have a mixed marriage. It's okay. We make it work. But her sister was the same thing, but my brother-in-law, Clay, was watching The Walking Dead, and she said, well, I want to watch something with you. We'll start from the beginning. And she got caught up into it. And then she was watching, well, let's watch Game of Thrones. And so The Walking Dead became a gateway to genre TV shows that she's watching. And so I think that's kind of cool its own. We've mentioned a couple times, I do not watch much other zombie shows because I'm like, okay, but I loved Veronica Mars. And so when I saw Rob Thomas was going to do a new series, I'm like, okay, I don't care what it's about, I've got to watch Rob Thomas. And Izombie is, you cannot think it's the same, well, it's not the same genre. Well, yeah, it is, Jesse, it's zombies. Yeah, but I know, and I just wanted to go around if you guys are watching it, and I agree with it, it's adorable. They went away from the premise. I was worried they were going to be kind of the character of the week, but they've kind of got past that. They continue the food montages, which are just incredibly creative. And I think there should be an Izombie cookbook,
There will be.
They're using chicken. So thoughts on Izombie and other shows? How much do you think, did they just use The Walking Dead as, well, we're like The Walking Dead, but funny, or something in their pitch things? And we'll start with Widget.
I don't watch Izombie regularly, simply because I have so little time to watch television. I have to be very selective, but I did sample a lot of the first season, and I don't know the name of the lead actress, but she's fantastic.
She is amazing.
I mean, that was the hardest part of me going, I'm not going to have time to watch this, is I just wanted to watch her do her thing, because I think she's fabulous. But I did like what they were doing with that, and the spin on the idea. And I mean, I know you're probably going to get a lot of that. It's like Walking Dead, but it's set in a high school. So I'm sure that pitch is being made an awful lot. I think the main thing that as far as other shows go, is, like you said, it's the gateway into the genre. I think it's basically when this can become the number one show on television, then I think it opens up, all kinds of other things that you wouldn't think about coming to television, coming there. Like,
I think it gave them the clout to be able to make Preacher.
Oh yeah,
I think
absolutely.
had they not had such success with The Walking Dead, I don't think that we
They've
would
been
see
trying
Preacher,
to
which
make-
is a fantastic show.
They've been trying to make Preacher for forever, and I mean, I'm fine.
Right.
I'm glad they got it on television, and I think it also adds to the idea because Why the Last Man and Preacher and all of these things were headed for feature films.
Yes.
And in all of the screenplays, it was like, well, you need to tie this up in one movie. It's like, I don't know if you've read Why the Last Man. How the hell can you do that?
Yeah, you can't.
You can't.
Yeah.
It would be a train wreck. So I think it's also opened the door for people to, translate that into a television series, which Preacher works much better at than it would as a feature film.
Right.
But it used to be feature films were the only place to go with this, and now that's also changed that, which I think is fantastic.
Absolutely. Morgan?
I watched Izombie and I thought it was very cute. And the zombie shows that I do watch, I can't imagine that the pitch was, this is like The Walking Dead, but funny. This is like The Walking Dead, but like super sad. I mean, I feel like the other zombie shows I've seen that have had at least a full, In the Flesh got 2 seasons. There's no way you pitch a show like that, as it's like The Walking Dead, but I think that you can pitch a show with, because zombies are so popular right now, we think that this will sell. But I think if you're comparing yourself to The Walking Dead in your pitch, I think you've already got a losing pitch, because because The Walking Dead is the best at being The Walking Dead, and if that's what you're looking for is The Walking Dead, but if you watch enough episodes of The Walking Dead, they have episodes that are funny. They have episodes that are sad. So I don't feel that it's like The Walking Dead, but XYZ is a successful pitch. I think that it is much more about, look at the success that this zombie media has had. People are obviously willing to invest time and a tremendous amount of money in merchandising into a zombie genre or any genre show. So, I think that that's much more...
Good.
The effect that it has on a pitch.
I'm going to have John answer, but in the meantime, we were looking for questions. So go ahead and answer, and then we're going to ask the audience.
Sure, and again, another, you've been a terrific moderator because you've been giving us very thoughtful questions to share with the audience.
Consider I wrote them last night at 10:30. I'm supposed to lead this thing.
That's okay.
Don't hear that, Shannon.
Doing a good job for us. I'm also one of those people who has only sampled Izombie. I saw a preview for it at the San Diego Comic-Con before it had become a series, and I thought, let's put this on the radar. And like you, I sampled some of the better episodes, and I'm happy I saw it. And one of these days, I keep saying I'm going to retire and be able to sit back and watch. Well, I did retire, but in retiring, I still do an 8-hour day of writing, because that's my number one career now is writing my books. And I just finished book number 17, so this is has to be precedent in my life. I did want to respond to how we got to the place where it's a gateway drug, because in many ways these shows are that way. When they were thinking about making Stephen King's The Stand, and I believe The Stand is the best of the Stephen King's works, they were going to make a film version out of it, and right at the moment there's a film version on the planning boards with Matthew McConaughey as the Dark Man. Boy, what an interesting concept. The Stand, I think, set up where we have this shorter form. It was the miniseries, and we could deal with things like the end of the world and communities having to pull together and fight evil and so on and so on. And so I really do see The Walking Dead as an extension of The Stand. I doubt if we would have gotten to The Walking Dead if it hadn't been for things like The Stand. And so, tremendous fan of The Stand. I'll go see the movie if they make it, but I don't think it can be any better than the original miniseries that was done. And of course, I watch Game of Thrones, but that's only on for, 7 or 8 weeks during the summer. So, you can get by with watching shorter forms like that.
Well, I will tell you, John, I don't want to depress you, but a couple of years ago, I went through a 9-month unplanned sabbatical where I was looking for a job. And when I got my job, thankfully, I realized, man, I didn't watch enough TV. Why did I not spend this 9 months instead of stressing about finding a job, rewatching all of West Wing or seeing all these things I wanted to see? I want to get questions, but I wanted to share a story. We mentioned George Romero, and Penn Jillette on his wonderful podcast talked about how he adored the man, adored The Walking Dead. It meant everything to him, and he agreed with you guys. It's not about zombies. And he wrote a email to Romero saying, "I hate you. You are premiering your new movie in my city, Las Vegas, at the very time I am on stage doing the Penn and Teller show. To the idea that your new movie is in my town and I can't see it drives me crazy. I hate you so much." And so Romero sent an email back saying, I know you hate me, and so I really hate to do this, but would you do a favor for me? He says, I need to show the movie that afternoon in the actual theater so I can test the sound and the film and everything. So I know you hate me, but is there any chance you would have you and some friends who would want to go watch this to be my guinea pigs? And so I just thought he talked about Penn, said he was just a absolutely lovely man, everything opposite of what you would think of someone that. And I just love that story. Instead of saying, "Oh, I apologize," going, "Oh, I know you hate me, but will you do me a favor?" So do we have any questions for the audience? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so you talked a lot about how it's impacted the genre on TV in the future. What do you think the impact is going to be in regard to movies? Do you think people that see The Walking Dead, like, I'd rather do long form and do TV, or go more towards
I have an answer for that.
Please, let's start with you.
There have been some fantastic indie zombie movies that have come out since The Walking Dead. I'm going to list right here, in fact, about them. Some more indie than others, but I mentioned The Girl with All the Gifts a little earlier, which is based on a novel, which is also excellent. The Battery, if you haven't seen that, is about 2 baseball players who were on the same college ball team, didn't know each other particularly well, but they're the only ones who didn't turn, and it's just the 2 of them trying to survive in the apocalypse together. And Here Alone, which won a Viewers Award at Tribeca. So I think that there are definitely still long-form zombie stories being told, but they're very much centered on 1 or 2 characters who are very isolated, and the story is, it's like we've talked about, it's not always about the zombies, and it's about like them dealing with the crushing isolation. But there are definitely still long-form zombie movies that are being made that are being very well received critically.
And if you think about it, most things do run in cycles. When we had Day of the Dead, I think, was the end of the first trilogy for George Romero. We practically, all the zombie movies just disappeared, and it was several years before they remade Dawn of the Dead. I think that sort of launched us into this next stage of zombie movies. And I suspect, since there is such a large canvas that exists there for The Walking Dead, and of course now we have Fear the Walking Dead, we could tell lots of other stories on that canvas. And whether it's in the same universe as The Walking Dead or not, there are plenty of other opportunities. But again, don't be too disappointed if it disappears, because when it does, it comes back even stronger. I would say 28 Days Later is probably the best zombie movie of the last 10,
hands down, that movie
20
was
years, yeah.
terrifying.
It was, and look where it came from. It was an early guerrilla filmmaking film. So they could not get any kind of permission to film in the sites in London. And they would drive up to a site, they'd jump out of the car, they'd start filming, and when they saw police, they jumped back into the car and drove away. And that's how they were able to get all of those amazing shots. And that's not how it was done for Charlton Heston and the Omega Man. They they actually filmed on Sundays in Los Angeles when there were not any people around.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I think that zombie genre can lend itself very well to a low budget film, because I think one way that they're doing that is that you just don't see the zombies very much. Like, you hear the noise in the background, you don't, and Here Alone, which is a remarkable film, you don't see a single zombie until the final scene. And even then, I feel like it would have been a better movie had you never seen them at all and only heard them in the distance. So
Yeah.
you can use zombies as a storytelling mechanic and make these movies very, very cheap, and they are scary and they are good, and you feel it with the protagonist.
Well, it goes back to Steven Spielberg doing Jaws, right? The mechanical shark didn't work, so they had to be creative and made a better film. Widget, did you have something to share?
Sure. First of all, to your question, but first, I'd also add to your list, there's a short film called Cargo.
I have it on my list,
which
literally
is-
right here.
Which is freaking amazing, and if they had given them the World War Z movie, we would have gotten a World War Z movie.
Yes.
And I would also add The Dead, which was two guys decided to go and shoot a zombie movie in Africa with locals as the extras, as the zombies. And I did an interview with them. They're insane. What they, you talk about guerrilla filmmaking, in London. The stuff that, imagine if you're trying to put, zombie contacts into people who have never worn contacts before in the middle of a desert.
Oh, wow.
They're insane. So those two I would add. As far as the long form for television, I think you're seeing that across the board, because what you hear actors saying, I think Kevin Spacey and Robin Wright for House of Cards have said this as well, is that a lot of the great stories, in their opinion, are being told on television because you have the room to let the story, stretch and breathe and whatnot,
Absolutely.
as opposed to, what I was talking about, where you try to compress it into an hour and 40 minutes, 2 hours. So it just doesn't work.
Go ahead, ma'am.
I was just going to ask you, because the current zombie genre, I think, is geared to kind of an intelligent viewer, like it's less about zombies and more about the characters, like we want more in the story. Do you think it could ever kind of regress back to what it was, to be just, hacking movies?
Is that Z-Land?
Well,
So I'd say yes.
well, I think you can have your cake and eat it too in that way, because at the same time that you had your Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, and you can always make an independent, no budget hack 'em slash 'em zombie movie, and sell it overseas and make your money back, and then go make another one. So I think you can have that at the same time that you can have the more cerebral
You
things
can have
going
your
on.
Scouts versus Zombies, I think is what that movie was.
Cockneys versus zombies.
Yeah,
Yes.
I do think you can actually, especially, kind of use that as kind of almost a nostalgia. I just want to do a slash and burn movie. So great question. I'm going to get to you first, but real quick, one word answer: fast or slow zombies?
I like the slow zombies because that adds the tension
Okay.
and anxiety to the whole
Yes.
thing.
Fast, because I am slow.
Okay.
Slow, because it's easier to put a metaphor on something that's not moving very fast.
I tend to think of the slow too, because that's the whole point, is that most of our fear comes from not something that happens overnight. It is something that slowly gets in.
And a fast zombie apocalypse won't last very long.
No.
We would all be just dead. So.
As
Absolutely.
we see in 28 Days Later, it did not take very long
Right.
for the zombie apocalypse to wipe everybody out.
Yes.
My friend, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Little prehistory. I grew up 15 kilometers from the Castle Dracula.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
Was fascinated about vampires / zombies, and this is where the lore came from, the territory I'm from, more or less. The historically zombie or vampires allure flare out during time of a crisis. Being it a plague or some sickness in the village, and more lately it's a sociological crisis. Do you think that we have this mass lore about zombies, because we have this situation in the country where the half of the country wants to go in one direction, another half of the country wants to go in another direction. And this is, for each side, zombie represent the other side.
That is a great question. If I had a gift card to give away, I would give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it isn't just, for the past, easily 10, 12 years, it has definitely between us and them, no matter which side of the aisle you're on. You're evil because you're not on my side. And politics has been very much about following the uniform, the laundry versus, hey, we both want this, let's find a compromise. So great question. What do you think? We'll start with you, John.
Well, actually, let me not speak for myself at this point. I have this wonderful quote from Kirkman again, sitting, through his panel at Comic-Con. He said, it's a story about survival, number one. And it says, 100 years ago, we were living in houses we built, growing food we ate, interacting with our families, he says, and that's a life that makes sense, or at least to Kirkman, that life that makes sense. Now we're doing jobs that we don't enjoy. We buy stuff we don't need. We've screwed things up. And I think what Kirkman is showing is a metaphor for our society. So, if you're on the right or if you're on the left, the other guys are the zombies, clearly. But it isn't just zombies. They're the aliens from outer space, whoever is the villain of the year at this point. And it's okay, you can write it like that, but it's much more fascinating when we don't really know who they are. I mean, I love the fact that in George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, we don't even know what created them. They say, well, it may have been a satellite re-entry or something like that, but who knows? So I prefer it more like that. They're the unknown enemy.
Morgan?
I think that's why we are seeing more zombie media that is either focused on the zombies themselves, like where the struggle is within them, their own identity of, how much is human, how much is monstrous, or movies where it is like one or two people all alone in the world, because I think that we do have a sociological crisis, but I think that the crisis is very much one of identity and where do we fit into this world. And I think a lot of people feel very isolated and very broken. So I think it's an internal crisis more than an external crisis that is driving a lot of the contemporary zombie media that we're seeing right now.
Okay. Widget?
John, speaking of what you had said about the unknown enemy, I like the fact that in The Walking Dead, you're already infected. There's no trying to keep it out of you. Oh, it's in you. So it's inevitable. It's not like in Romero where if you die and you haven't been bitten, you don't get back up. Oh no, you're going to get back up. That's a nice little twist on it. And speaking of the psychological angle that you were saying, I mean, I think that there is a lot of internal turmoil going on. I mean, I don't remember what the stats are. I know they are of the huge variety. How many people are medicated right now because of feeling that broken feeling? So I think there is, it's absolutely true. When there is discord in the land, then you want to look at the vampire or the zombie or something as an external version of that. But we have so many internal demons that we want to try to externalize so that we can deal with them. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of times a zombie apocalypse is pretty easy. I mean, if you could only shoot all your problems in the head and that would do the trick, then, I don't know, I'd get along a lot better than I am right now.
Sure.
I just wanted to make one last comment, and Bridget, you triggered it for me. We are carrying around inside of us, not the virus, but the beast, the id monster, if you will. And that id monster we keep under control because we've got laws or medication. What happens on that day when we decide to let that id monster out? Okay, we're going to have all of the zombies right there around us. Yeah. And speaking of which, the zombies really aren't the bad guys, if you think about it, in The Walking Dead. It's those other groups out there, the cannibal group and...
Which is
right on down the line.
Those
are the scary guys. I want to kill them off before I get the zombies.
Well, and I think the complete trauma of the whole Negan sequence with Glenn and so forth.
Jeez,
What struck me most about that was, as they're driving off at the end of the episode, Rick looks in the mirror, and behind him he sees a zombie get down and start to eat what was left. And I love that symbol of, oh, you thought that was the problem. Oh, that's behind you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. When do you see what you're driving towards? And that to me was an incredibly effective way to end that episode.
I hate the person-on-person group thing, though, because I
do too, but that's the world.
But it's not the world. But it's not the world. In real-world times of crisis, yes, you do have individuals who will take advantage of that chaos to loot or commit other crimes. But what you usually see when you have a huge crisis is people pull together. Look at the way we pull together for hurricanes. Look at the way that we pull together for terrorist attacks. I think that we don't give humanity enough credit for the ways in which we do want to pull together and take care of each other.
Well, look at all the rioting that's taking place because one group doesn't like what the other group did. I mean, that's crazy stuff.
Oh, I was going to say there, yeah.
No, because I will give you 3 places in the world. Middle East, Yugoslavia, and the Central Africa.
But those are established tribe versus tribe, though. Theoretically, in the United States, we are tribe. We pull together for a national crisis.
Specific. Anywhere else in the world, I came here because of war. I lived in Moldova. Moldova is a spit in the mouth. The country of 9 million people. I mean, Atlanta have now, 7? Mm-hmm. We're talking about the size of Atlanta, the whole country. And this country was trying to split itself in 3 different parts.
Yeah.
And the people in the street was literally fighting each other, not physically fighting. But it was a point where you would feel that somebody would start shooting in the street. So you're talking about very American specific, where everybody jumps up and starts helping each other. The world is very much different.
Well,
the world is very much us against them. You speak in a different language. You are other. You're not us, so I will fight you. Doesn't matter what. You're family to family. Like in Yugoslavia, there was examples in Yugoslavia where one was a Muslim and one was, like, wife was Muslim and the husband was Christian, and they were fighting across the yard.
Yeah.
Like with rifles.
But if you were to drop zombies in the middle of that, would do you still feel that the 2 groups would be trying to kill each other and just, well, let's not worry about the zombies, let's focus on...
Well, and I think what would happen is, and I do think that's where the show is taking, is you start worrying about protecting your own and versus thinking broadly enough that we're all the own. It's like Jon Snow, we're all in the same group,
but
the breathing
ones. We've had 2 years, roughly, that have passed in Showtime. That is not enough time for these people to have formed into highly developed
I think
garbage people cultures in 2 years.
Okay, that was in the television show, and
2 years we're having cannibal cultures and garbage people.
Come on,
you can't go straight to Mad Max Fury Road in 2 years. I totally agree, and that was in the television show, and someone wrote that one on crack. But basically, you do have situations where you have like Katrina or Harvey, where people can come together, and I think that's more of an example of good leadership. You also have examples like, what was it, the Carnival cruise ship that ran aground and was stuck for 5 days, and after 2 days, people were crapping in the hallways and trying to eat each other. Yeah. So I mean, it all depends on a number of different factors as to what could happen. I want to be optimistic like you are, but I have read too much horror fiction.
Do you know, Ronald Reagan said when he was still in office, what we really need to have unite the world is to have an alien invasion, because suddenly we would all come together.
Of course, he also had Alzheimer's.
I don't think that would happen. I think we would have these divergent groups. In fact, there would be sellouts to the aliens.
Okay.
And so, I think it's idealistic to think that people are going to come together. if we could come together.
We're getting close, and I have one more question, but go ahead, ma'am.
I just wanted to add to this. I think it's not necessarily, I agree with you and I agree with you, but the difference is that it's the leaders. It's all about the leaders. People, they do want to get along. They do want to help each other.
Let's have Rick as our next president.
There we go.
Whoever's leading is the one that makes the decisions.
Yeah.
So if your leader is warped, then the society is warped.
So, I one last question for the panel, and then I want to give everyone a chance to promote where to find them. But I think the other influence that this show has had is Talking Dead, because not only has, but now then younger, and I see all these shows have a post-show either on the internet or on a YouTube channel or something. So, just a quick thought about that. So, Widget and
I mean that's not only has it given Chris Hardwick more shows.
Yes, Chris Hardwick has gotten a career. Yes,
but yeah, that they have figured out a way to create another hour of content without having to spend a lot of money. So yeah, you're going to see more and more of that because it's easy content.
Yeah, and it's and I think for those of us who are, I would have loved a Talking Lost after each episode, and so
absolutely.
Maureen?
I think that this is, people talk about things being fan service. This is like the ultimate fan service, because if there's one thing that a fan loves to do is spend an hour immediately following the thing that they watched, talking it to death.
Yes.
So, I think that they have figured out, we are not just making these shows for the casual viewer. We are making these shows for people who want to obsess over this, buy all of our Funko Pops, who want to go to forums and talk about it, who want to write fan fiction about it, who want to email photographs or send canned possum meat to Norman Reedus. These are the shows for fans.
I think early Josh Whedon talked about I would rather a small passionate fan base than a large casual fan base. John?
Oh, I agree 100% with what they're saying, and you know what, to a lesser degree, HBO is doing the same thing with Game of Thrones. They're doing the little outtakes where the producers talk about how they got to certain scenes, and that's all stolen from what they do with Talking Dead.
Story synced. Any of you guys do story sync? Because you get that multimedia experience, so that I can be watching The Walking Dead while I also can be doing Walking Dead trivia while I'm watching The Walking Dead, and then I can also have a chat window up with a friend on my laptop, and we're talking about what we're doing on Story Sync and what we're watching.
Perfect. And real quick, one last thing on that is not only have they learned how to tap into fans and their obsession, but they've learned that they can turn other people who were not previously that obsessed into that level of obsessed fans.
Yeah, and it's very entertaining to see other celebrities being engaged as fans.
Oh yes.
Widget, where can we find you?
I can be found at needcoffee.com, which is as in need coffee and lots of it. And I can also be found on Twitter at Widget with 2 T's.
All right, Maureen?
I can be found on most social media platforms as raving_liberal, or on Tumblr, raving_liberal, all one word, no underscore.
John?
Just simply johnflynn.com, and all of my books are up there. Plus, I do a blog on current science fiction films.
All right. And I am at Jesse Jackson, DFW, on Twitter. If you are lucky, you'll catch someone yelling at me because they think I'm the Reverend Jackson, and I have to remind them that I'm the Jesse Jackson obsessed with Doctor Who and Bruce Springsteen. Thank you guys very much for joining us. We hope please go to the DragonCon app and give us 5 stars. And thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.